Hey everyone, this is episode 5 of Tandem Podcast. If you haven't heard of the Alchemist Crew, it's a crew based in a couple different areas of Europe, and I followed their videos ever since they started making them, and they really were an original voice in European scootering at least to me. What they were doing was very aesthetically different. Their choices were a lot different than what was going on in France, which seems to be the most prevalent European scooter riding that at least I see as an American. And there was always a sense of mystery. It was like, I don't know anything really about these guys. I don't know really even where they're from, because it seemed like different locations. And I always wanted to find out even before I did this podcast. So I started trying to get in contact with anybody that was in charge of editing the videos, because I thought that would be the most important person to talk to. And it ended up being pretty challenging. I actually contacted them through like an automated form, like a contact form on their website, and then someone replied, and that person was Juraj Klas, which is who I ended up interviewing. A really interesting perspective on scootering, and at least for me personally, it definitely made me think, maybe shift my opinions and stances on different things. So here we go, episode 5. One more thing to note, we talked about a lot of different videos and just sources, and I linked to every single one of them in the description of this video, and they're all in chronological order. So if you want, you can click on them as you follow along the podcast or just after. But there's a lot of good stuff there to be seen, so just check that out. It's just all in the description. So where are you located, and is everybody else you ride with located in the same place?
So I'm located in Bratislava. That's the capital of Slovakia. After the Second World War, I mean, like, it was split into two blocks, like the Western bloc and the Eastern bloc. This part would be the Eastern bloc. There are certain cultural barriers between those two, so that's something important to understand. Basically, there was scene in Slovakia ever on since I started riding. It would shrink, it would grow larger. There still would be some sort of scene, so it's not like I'm coming from a place where there is no scene at all. Before Alchemist, like that's far before Alchemist. So I only got in contact with David and the guys from Austria later, because like they are not living in the same country.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of confused about, because in a lot of the videos, since I don't really know Europe too well, I'd recognize like Barcelona, and then I'd recognize like other various locations in Europe, and I was like,
Barcelona was a one-time trip. There is a separate video from the Barcelona guys, but that video I didn't make. The video was made by Iñaki. That's work only of the Barcelona guys, and that's basically how the connection started. All located around like Slovakia, Austria, also like some guys from Czech Republic, because those countries are all right next to each other. Bratislava, so that's the capital of Slovakia. It's in the very western part of Slovakia. And Wien, what's the capital of Austria, is on the very eastern part of Austria, so it only takes about an hour by train. Those are completely different countries. I mean, we speak Slovakian, they speak German. I mean, there is even this language barrier, because I actually can't speak German very well, so I have to talk English. Also, like the background when it comes to scooter scene. Like the scooter history of those places are completely different.
There were a couple pretty good full lengths out of there.
Oh yeah, I mean there was Vienna Calling, yeah, by Max Kernmeier, and also Bist Deppat.
Do you ride with him when you go there?
Not all the guys from Vienna are like still active. All the older guys are like busy with university life, I guess, in general. So I don't know. I don't really get to see them that often, but I mean we stay in touch.
Do you want to talk about how Alchemist was formed?
I started writing around 2010 something. I don't know, until like 2012. There was like not much connections between the guys all over Slovakia. And then like it started building up. We would get together to sesh more often. It's like the scene felt like more compact, like more vivid. For some reason in 2013 it sort of started falling apart, and sort of felt to me that it's like dying out. So I was like, yeah, maybe I could do something different. Like maybe I could work more closely with the guys from Wien, from Austria, because that's about the time that the connection was building. Since I already knew David and I came with this idea, after presenting my idea to him, he was like down to. So that's basically how it started.
Like what about the other people involved? How did they get involved? Were you all just riding together?
Yeah, I mean it's sort of hard to define, because it's like identity of Alchemist as a project is like really fluid. I don't know, like I can't really say it's a crew, because if I was to say it's a crew, I mean it would be like really open-ended crew. I mean it's not like there are certain guys involved. It's pretty much like anybody that gets involved basically gets involved. I mean,
I came across the blog. Who does that? The blog post about Alchemist?
That's basically me and David. David is actually studying like journalism, politics science, so I mean he's good at writing. I sort of suck when it comes to photos. Yeah, it's like quite even, because we are like both really into photography.
Yeah, that's what I noticed about the blog. It was sort of these longer form posts, and the writing was really good. And then I also noticed too about the photography. I saw the Flickr page, and then I looked through all those photos.
Yeah, I mean the Flickr page sort of isn't a thing anymore, because I don't know when we even stopped posting photos there. So it's like most of the photos are either posted directly to the blog, Facebook page maybe. I mean this is sort of a bummer, because like apart from like really publishing your photos in a printed form, there is not really a legitimate form of publishing them. There is no real use in posting your photos on Instagram.
Yeah, I just noticed that. I mean, there's very few photographs of scootering sort of shot in this like photojournalistic style and shot on the analog format.
I mean, to me it does matter, but like generally speaking, it doesn't really matter like what type of media do you use to capture. That's what we use. I mean, that's what fits our style of shooting.
Yeah, but just the way they were shot and how they looked really stood out to me. There's not really much like that in scootering.
I mean, speaking about analog photography, like David Coe, Aaron Abramson, maybe. I don't know if he is into analog photography, but like I quite like his stuff.
I've talked to David a lot about it too. Just like give him suggestions on like gear to use and scanners and stuff like that. But yeah, Aaron's always been great too. I've always liked Aaron's riding photos, because they're not just kind of traditional documentation. He always gets like an interesting angle or perspective or something like that.
There is something extra about them, like it's not just straightforward riding photo. I don't know, there is quite a lot of crappy photos in scooter industry. So I mean the good ones stand out, like there are not so many. If you generalize this overly, I mean like Paul Asenia, overall like he's the one of the top guys. And I mean I'm not talking about like scooters related photography like overly. Like he's a real good photographer.
Yeah, but I just think the analog thing really spoke to me because I only shoot analog film. I don't own a digital camera. And I do it for a lot of reasons, but I look at a lot of photographers' work, but it's so hard to, I mean, the amount of photographers that are sort of actually consider themselves a photographer in scootering is pretty slim.
It doesn't really matter if you call yourself a photographer. I mean, as long as you shoot photos and you do it well and you do it with all the passion it takes, I mean, who really cares what you think about it? I mean, as long as you're doing it the very same way, I mean, that there's... I mean, you don't really have to recognize yourself as a photographer in order to actually be one.
But it's hard for people to see your work or something if you don't put it out there in some way, like sort of recognize what you're doing is worth sharing, you know?
Even if you would share the work, I mean, I don't know, you might just think of it as documentation. I mean, if it's only about like your self-promotion and like presenting yourself as something, that doesn't really matter, right? I mean, the actual output is the thing that matters.
You're in college right now, right?
Yeah, I'm studying industrial design. I've basically finished the first year about now. Also took one semester of mathematical analysis, but that didn't really work out too well.
That's actually what Tom Cavillog studied. I think he graduated this year, actually.
Isn't it more like product design? Because there are like certain differences.
Yeah, I definitely understand that there are differences, and it seems like he does do more like product design.
Those are like slightly different point of views. I mean, if you are only doing product design, you are mostly concerned about, I don't know, like ergonomics, materials in a sense of how they would feel or how they would function. If you do it from the engineering point of view, I mean, you have to consider like the manufacturing processes and like all this technical data that it actually takes to produce the final product. I don't know, maybe not as interesting as the product design. You actually have to deal with all this shit and there is not so much time left for the actual designing of the product. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of sounds creepy, but that's the way it is.
Well, I don't know who it was, but who was making the darkroom prints? Because I remember seeing videos of it in photos and stuff like that.
I actually develop all my film material in my bathroom. David has an actual darkroom setup, so he has like a proper enlarger and he can do prints.
And I also saw that you made, I'm not sure of the process. Is it the process you used to print the shirts? Is it lithography? Is that what it is?
No, it's actually lino cut. So you have like a soft mat that's either made from a soft rubbery material or something that's sort of like a layer of clay, and under the layer of clay there is like mesh made of some fibers, so it actually holds the clay on top of it. Basically you cut the negative copy of the print into it, then you roll the ink onto the mat, and basically you create the positive print from it by transferring the ink from the mat onto the paper.
And what was the motivation to do that over sort of like a normal silk screen?
Silk screen is for sure faster, but you have to have the screens, and you have to have the silk screen press, like all this stuff. The initial expenses would be way higher for like a proper screen printing setup if we were to do it on our own, or also we could have get it done by some third-party company, but that we didn't really fancy because we wanted to make it our own. Yeah, it was sort of tricky, and like the printing process was not really consistent. I couldn't really make more than, I don't know, let's say 5 or 7 at once. I mean it's way easier to print paper this way, because what you do when printing paper, you actually lay the paper on top of the mat. You can't print shirts directly. I mean, you have to stuff something solid into the shirt, so the shirt area would lay flat.
Were you giving away prints with the purchase of that shirt, or?
David actually made those prints, and it's like some sort of random photo with some writing scratch into the film.
When I saw those prints and then I saw how you were making the shirts, it just sort of seemed it wasn't automated. It seemed very personal.
I don't really like this approach of just like making merchandise the way that you just make shitload of shirts and then just sell out.
Regardless of really like the profit and stuff, I think it just really stuck out because most people, they'll just make a digital design on a computer and then send it off and get it printed. They have no real like physical hand in it, you know what I mean? Like creating the thing they're selling.
That's like the way you work with your stuff. I mean, if you want to really take care, I mean, you could do really good design digitally and like send it out and get it printed, and you could still be getting like very personal design. I mean, if you put enough care into it, like it doesn't matter. I mean, that's just the way we choose.
I know you emailed me some videos, but do you want to talk about your influences for scootering and for also creating videos?
This is going to be a hard one. I mean, like, I watch a shit ton of skate videos. I watch probably way too many. Japanese skate scene is like sort of interesting to me. You can really see like how the scene there reflects the cultural influences. Japan as a country is sort of isolated. Their culture is like very different to the Western world. You can really see this being reflected onto the skateboard scene and like.
Yeah, I just remember seeing them at first, and it was so different than anything I'd ever seen. I didn't know really what to think of it at first, but
yeah, I feel like some people probably wouldn't like that sort of approach, because like Japanese culture, generally speaking, is sort of like they tend to do stuff in a minimalistic manner. This also reflects in the skateboarding. Like there are like no crazy big handrails and like big drops, stair sets, and like it still sort of feels more coherent, more fluid, and like more complete. And like at the very end, it also feels like more meaningful. Like they are actually doing it for some reason. Like it's not only because they want to like show their skill or like show everybody that like, oh, like I have balls big enough to hit this rail.
Yeah, with a lot of the stuff they filmed on, it seems like rather like they sort of solved an equation or solved a puzzle, or
yeah, I mean that's probably because the way they work with the urban space, because like the architecture in Japan is so different, and they take advantage of that
because they're from there and have been like accustomed to that. Because I see a lot of skate videos that are in Japan from people that don't live there, like people from all over the world, and it's just normal skating, you know.
This is very interesting to me because like there are like all those big name brands like Half and I don't know Adidas sending their teams to ride the streets of Japan. The output is totally not the same. It sort of feels like completely different worlds. I mean, it doesn't really matter like in a physical form like what the spots are, but what matters is like what you make them to be. With a certain approach, you can turn a very shitty spot into something very desirable.
I always thought that was interesting, how something that was written is classified as something that is to be written. A lot of times it's only if someone has written it.
Yeah, like a lot of videos tend to be like compilation of like spots that are there and like people know about them, and like they are generally recognized as spots. So it's always like fresh to see something like never was written before, or like never was written the same way before.
I mean, something is only a spot because you classify it as that, and you write it and you make it your own. It's really interesting, like if somebody takes a trip somewhere really far and it's just to ride a curb or something, you know what I mean? But it's like there's so many curbs out there, but just because someone else has ridden it before, they look at it and say, oh, well, this is the one I need to be riding.
Yeah, I mean, talking about curbs, this one might sounds a little bit funny, but like the curbs are not the same all over the world. Like in America, like you can like no problem do slappies, right? Because like the curbs are like painted with this thick paint, or I don't know, like that's the idea.
That's actually only in California.
Okay, because like here in Slovakia, like most of the curbs are just like rough concrete, and like no way you are riding any of those.
Yeah, that's how it is where I live actually too. I forget who made it, but I saw this skate shirt. I think it was 3 illustrations of spots, but the spots were like that. It was just like a curb, a fire hydrant, maybe some sort of like bump or something.
Yeah, like the really general stuff, like the most trivial spots. The guys from Polar had like video consisting only of wall rides and shove-its. Like there were no other tricks, like only wall rides and shove-its. It's sort of similar to like categorizing the spots and then like categorizing the tricks. And I mean, they actually managed to create like a worthy video only doing the wall rides and shove-its.
I mean, I like their sort of full lengths, but then more specifically, I like the sort of like shorter formed videos that have a theme or have an idea. Like, you know how they did that one in New York City where they brought
like
the Wally,
where they carried around the kicker and like those obstacles.
That's almost more successful than sort of just like a highlight reel of a summer trip to New York. You know what I mean?
It has that feeling, the vibe.
Yeah, it has a premise, yeah.
One problem I had with this sort of video is like you could look at it as a new wave of creativity in skateboarding, but I feel that's like a little bit misleading. It's not really like a true creativity, because like people see those videos, instead of getting it right and being like, whoa, like they did something creative, like I should probably try my thing as well. They get it the wrong way around, so they're like, yeah, those guys are cool, I should do the very same thing they are doing. So a big portion of like independent skateboarding movement is like, it's a lot of the same stuff in just like different colors, basically.
Like, since someone had success doing something a certain way, then that means that if that person does it the same way, then they'll have success. But the issue is it creates just a never-ending circle of duplication.
If you are able to actually add some value to it and like make it your own, I mean, that's like that's the goal. But if you just straight out rip off, then it's like, yeah, then just bullshit.
Okay, so you made that VHS video, your latest video on the YouTube channel, and it was the one before that. It's called Shin Splint in Zagreb. Just the way that fisheye is, sort of like, it's not really wide and it doesn't have any vignette. It sort of reminded me of the Polar videos.
Yeah, basically my camera setup and David's camera setup are like very similar. I have VX 2100 with MK2 Century fisheye. David has VX 2000 with the very same fisheye. Would we have VX 1000 with the MK1 fisheye? I mean, like, of course, the angle of view would be wider, but like, this is what we have.
I mean, I guess you could say an unconventional choice of fisheye, but since the videos are so unique, it's like the content is overpowering the choice of equipment. You know what I mean?
Of course, it's like matter of what look do you prefer more, but in our case, it's also what's actually available for us to work with. At least in Europe, it's sort of tricky to get a VX 1000 that it's not so pricey, and also the fisheye for it, they are just way too expensive. way more expensive. And I mean, like, since we are paying for all the equipment on our own, I mean, like, we can't really afford that much stuff.
Tilt has recently started filming with standard definition cameras again, and we've been using the VX 1000s. And I mean, I've always loved the look and preferred it to HD and to the VX 2100s. But I know exactly what you mean. It was so expensive when we were looking at prices.
VX 1000s they are not like much older than the 2100s, but they still are older. And like, if you are to pay all the money for the camera, you don't really want the camera to like break down on you, and it's also like hard to get them repaired.
That's what I was gonna say, since like, so I've probably been filming with the VX 1000 for maybe like 7 or 8 months, and since then I'm on my second VX 1000 and I'm on my third time sending it in for repair. But it's actually not that hard to get them repaired here in America. There's a place, there's like one place in the whole country that's sort of just the best place to send them, and everybody sends them there. But yeah, I've had to refilm so much stuff because the camera broke. But I mean, I'm okay with it just because I love the look of that camera.
At least to me, it feels like the VX 1000, except the wider point of view and like the vignetting. It also has like the more grainy look, and like the visual is like more rough. Only major advantage of VX 2100 is that outperforms the 1000 at night. I guess that's the reason why the Japanese guys actually use two lights. Like they use one light on the camera and then second light in the other hand. They film everything this way, like lines, singles. We are scooter riders, right? Like we have only one hand available, so it's like it won't work that way. You could still carry around skateboard. I mean, I actually built a filming board thinking like, yeah, like that would be a good idea, like start filming clients with the board. But at the end of the day, like you are not taking that board with you when you are hitting the streets. Like you already have to take all the camera gear, and like you are not really willing to.
I've been around scooter riders that have tried to use boards for filming, and it depends on what you're filming, but sometimes you have to be actually good at skating, you know, going up and down curbs really fast while you're filming. You can't really just hop on a skateboard.
First, you have to be comfortable with riding the board. I mean, that's for sure. Yeah, I mean, there are certain things that are like quite tricky to do when it comes to filming while riding a scooter. You have to hold onto the bars. Like the bars gets into the way all the way. Like I feel like that's the reason why in a lot of clips, you get like portion of the scooter of the guy who's filming in the frame. This is something undesired, but it happens a lot. Riding a board, like there are no bars, like you can get super low with the camera. And like
when you're the same stance as somebody and you're both on scooters and you're filming, you have to cross over the camera, like cross it past your bars, you know?
I tend to film like in a backward movement when this happens. It's not that I'm following the rider, I'm actually going before the rider, so there are no bars in my way.
I always like that angle though, when what you were talking about, when you're in front of the rider, but it's pretty challenging to film like that because of the various speeds the rider is going. They're speeding up or slowing down, and you really have to stay at the same speed because they'll run into you, you know?
I probably wouldn't film like hill line that way. Filming lines in hills with a scooter is like generally quite tricky. The guy behind all the camera work from Concrete Crew, Anton, that guy is so good at filming hill bump lines. Like I don't understand how he manages to like film those lines, like David Ghost parts, like all those lines from San Francisco, and also like this recent video from Hella Ruthless. I believe Josh Young was behind the camera. To me, it seems like he's one of the best guys behind the camera. There were like also like some super fast Hilbum blinds. He manages to get them all done the way they are supposed to be.
Yeah, and I think with Anton, it's even more impressive because a lot of what he filmed it with a DSLR, which is, I think it's one of the hardest cameras to film fisheye well with, you know?
I mean, the problem with DSLR is like it's different side ratio. With DVX and VX, they are 4:3. So that's like quite standard. But with DSLR, those are 16:9, right? It's not like panoramic wide, but it's like pretty wide already. So you are like getting a lot more unnecessary information into your framing. You either make the space in the frame weird or doesn't look good.
But then just holding it stable, I feel like is harder than a VX because the weight is distributed differently, you know what I mean?
You have to have a right handle. VX, it's not really a heavy camera. Like VXs are like, they are quite lightweight. Yeah, I mean they sort of feel like they are meant for like filming skateboarding and like filming this sort of stuff.
Do you want to talk about your experimentation with different video formats, like different cameras for filming the Alchemist videos?
I basically only filmed with the VX. The actual footage is filmed with the VX, like the B-roll stuff is filmed with the VHS, just because of the look you get.
And have you ever experimented with Super 8 film?
Yeah, I always sort of wanted to try Super 8 on my own. It gets sort of tricky when it comes to actually processing the film. Nowadays, Kodak is sort of like bringing the Super 8 thing back to life. A year or 2 years ago, like it was like dying out. At least it seemed it was dying out. The film itself is like super expensive. Then you have to get it developed and scanned. Nobody does it in Slovakia anymore. And no one even sells the Super 8 film in Slovakia anymore. So you have to order the film from, let's say, Germany or England. And then you have to ship it back to get it developed and to get it scanned. And like, yeah, the costs are really high.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that Kodak was doing that because if a company that big is doing it, that means there is some profit to be made. Yeah, but that was just kind of surprising to me that there was that much of a demand. Because did you see how they also made their own camera for it too?
Yeah, I know. They are also bringing back the camera. It's not only that the VHS is more available. I mean, like the camera itself is like super cheap. Like you can buy a functional VHS camera, like the small VHS camera for like, I don't know, probably as little as 20 euros. I mean, the battery probably would be like in a really bad condition, but like the camera itself will still probably work quite fine. And you can reuse the tapes, so virtually it's like it has no cost at all. The VHS camera I use, it actually has thread. I don't really think it's like a filter thread, but there is like a little sunshade sort of thing, and you can actually unscrew it, and there is I don't know what's the diameter, but there is some sort of thread. I bought like this tiny Optica fisheye for the VHS. You don't really have to be afraid of breaking that camera. Even if the camera would get stolen, like that setup, I probably wouldn't be that pissed.
I remember watching all the videos on your channel since they started being posted a few years back, but then the one was posted on Trendkill. What was the story behind that? Like, how did you get in contact with them? And
I made some videos even before Alchemist, and I believe there was one that was posted on Trendkill before. I don't really think like that's where the connection started, because like back then I was just like a random kid. I mean, I still sort of am, but like I don't know, like the video sort of was like a big deal for me. I certainly wanted for the video to get like a little bit more attention, maybe, because like we really did spend a lot of time in making it. If we were to be talking about music, like we would be talking about labels. If you'd compare Trendkill to something like a label, then it totally makes sense to like release your video project through them.
what was the main idea besides just filming at night And how long were you filming for it?
At night you get more intimate contact with the city itself, and like you can also ride spots that by day you wouldn't get to ride at all. And like also the feeling of the footage is totally different. You appear out of nowhere, and at the end of the line, or let's say at the end of the trick, you disappear. Yeah, I don't know, let's say roughly 2 years. I mean, it's not really like 2 years in a row because way that I go to film with David, because since he's not from my city and I actually have to come, I either have to come to Wien or he has to come to Bratislava. We would sesh like multiple times a month, and sometimes like we wouldn't sesh together a few months in a row.
Can you tell me a little bit about Inaki? Because I remember seeing the videos from Barcelona, and they were filmed really well. I was wondering who he was, like what his involvement in scootering was.
Iñaki is one of the best filmers, like that's for sure. I mean, I would probably even say like when it comes to like scootering, he might even be like the very best filmer. Like the stuff he does with the HVX is like no joke. The scene in Barcelona at the time we were there was like so vivid and like so powerful.
When I saw the video on Trendkill and realized that was all filmed at night, I immediately thought of the skate video called This Time Tomorrow. It was filmed by Chris Mulhern. Have you heard of that video?
It definitely sounds familiar, but like I'm not sure.
So there were like 6 or 7 parts, and as the video went on, all the clips that were filmed, it transitioned from day to night. So the first person, their part was all in daytime.
This reminds me of this video. Like I feel like it's much harder if you actually film a video with a certain concept. Even though it adds some extra volume, it also limits you when it comes to like choosing spots, and like especially when you are trying to like time filming process for a very specific lighting situation. Like that's something like whoa. There was this much newer video called Color Fools. All the parts were based on colors, so like each guy would only write spots of certain color. It makes so much more sense for a video to actually have some coherent idea, some real thought process behind it. Yeah, I mean, if the concept is like this clear, like parts based on colors, like yeah, everybody can manage that one, like everybody gets it, but it can be hidden in more detailed work, so it's not like so straightforward.
A lot of different scooter companies will make these short videos, like say it's a video at the skate park, like one day at the skate park, and I watch it and I always think, why does this need to exist, you know?
Let's say the skate park looks cool, like let's say I wish I would get to ride at skate park. Maybe it gives you this sort of feeling, or maybe it gives you this sort of feeling like, whoa, the riding is cool. Yeah, but like that's about it. Like there's no more value than that. I mean, it's not that I'm saying like those videos are like completely unnecessary, but it's definitely that you can't really compare this sort of video to like, you can't really claim that sort of video to be something really representative. It may showcase the level of riding, that's about it, and at least to me that's sort of plain. Like it's lacking taste. Don't get me wrong, like very recently there was this video of Matt Grippi. Like this video really stands out to me because like he does the craziest transitions in like crazy concrete balls, and like you don't see this stuff being done like anywhere, anytime. Like this is something that really stands out, and this is something different. Like that's not the same case as we were talking before, because that's what his writing is about, and it's not just like showcasing that, whoa, I can write this well. Like there is something more to it. I feel like there is a great misconception about park riding when it comes to scooters. What's the very first thing you think of when somebody mentions like park riding? Like let's forget this whole bizarre park versus street don't even mention it. Like, I don't care. If somebody mentions like park riding, like, I don't know, like I either think of like seshing the parks with homies. So that's like good association. I don't know, like all this competition stuff and like this sort of shit. Like, I don't know if it sounds appealing to you, because it to a degree doesn't really to me.
I always say that I don't dislike it, or I don't really have an opinion on it, because it's sort of to me it's an alternate universe. It's like a different culture. You know what I mean?
Even though my opinion is not really like too specific, I'm not really at place to judge it, because like I'm not part of that thing at all. Amongst those guys who are into this stuff, like there are guys who do it with passion and who do it with their self-involvement and who actually end up getting some valuable output. And on the other hand, you have all the guys that sort of just do the same thing and like add few spins, flips, sprites, whatsoever. The output is sort of messy and like you get the idea. At least for me, like I suck at writing transition so badly. I can say I can't write transition at all. So it's like every time I see someone who is able to do it properly, like I'm super stoked. And I feel like scootering is lacking, like guys who can actually write parks in style in a creative way. So it's not like fly out and like throwing as many bri flips, whips and bar spins and like this sort of stuff and like flying over flybox and shit, but like real riding pools.
Yeah, I've definitely feel the same exact way. I always say like I want people to ride pools and stuff like that, and I think some of the only people that I can think of at the top of my head would be like Logan Fuller and Cooper Clark. You know how they made those like long park videos? I thought those were great.
Maybe you know this guy from UK, Lewis Williams.
No, I don't know him. No.
He rides the same parks that the other guys ride, but like what he gets from the parks is like totally different. The level of riding is crazy, and like on this level, it's like crazy riding, but it also like makes sense and like it looks very appealing and stylish. There is more to it than just whoa, gnarly fucking trick. Yeah, there was something like the only purpose of doing trick is to be captured on film. That's just like the final goal, like you said it.
Yeah.
The film trick is the final output of the riding to a third person who haven't been there when it actually happened. Yeah, to a certain degree it's correct, because like the other person has no other mean of like witnessing of what actually went down. But like I have to really highly disagree with claiming that filming a trick is the only reason for actually doing the trick, because that's just so wrong on so many levels. I personally ride scooter for more than just creating the videos. It wouldn't really be satisfying experience if only thing that you would get from actually doing the scootering would be the few seconds of footage.
Yeah, I think I was mainly talking about what scootering is to the audience, not what it is to the person riding.
Even to the audience, like we have to distinguish the sorts of audiences, because there is like active audience and passive audience. The active audience doesn't necessarily even have to see the footage, so they don't really have to see the actual video that the footage is used in. So it's to them it's not really like a visual experience. It's more of like performance. They see it happen in real life. Like they are free to interact with what's actually going on. So like to them, the video dimension is totally irrelevant.
Like once again, I think I was only talking about the video audience. But yeah, I do understand what you say about the people that are there when you are riding in person.
Yeah, I mean, when you actually process all the writing and all the video into a visual form, like that's something completely different than what actually happened. Even if you try your hardest, it's not like real objective experience. It's like reflections of what actually happened. The real experience and the reflected experience may be like quite different. Yeah, at least to me, the actual experience is just as important as the experience that I'm trying to reflect.
Yeah, I totally, I mean, with photography and video, I always understand that it's never true. It's never the true experience. It's just an interpretation of it.
Yeah, because you basically create a fictional space. Yeah, you are free to manipulate everything. You create everything. There were some other things mentioned, like about some sort of rules. Like I sort of sensed the ironical manner in which it was meant, but it's like there are no rules really. Like there was something like a filmer must stop at the end of the line, or else it would look wacky. I mean, that's totally not true. I mean, if you can make it work that way without stopping, like you can even get better output. I feel like that's, we sort of already talked about this with the spots. Like people see spots being written and they click like, like those are the spots, like we have to write those. But if you are able to like liberate yourself from those, from those boxes and from those rules, and if you are able to work outside those, then you are like free to maybe better, maybe not, but certainly your own output.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I discussed those rules, because I've always thought it was, I've always questioned it, like why are these things brought upon people, or why do people bring them upon themselves? I just don't really understand where it comes from, other than just sort of being accepted within a culture. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, at the end, like you are only doing this for yourself. I mean, it might sound very egoistic, but like if you're not writing for your own experience, like then what for? Like why are you doing it? I believe some people may be doing it for money, but that's like we are not talking in about this sort of stuff, right?
In America, when I talk to various scooter riders about European scooter riding as a whole, I think for the majority of people, they aren't really interested in it. Like the Alchemist videos are so different than most European scooter riding and scooter videos. Did you ever realize that? And do you ever ride with people, say like all the people in France, their videos and their riding is so much different than yours?
I feel I see what you mean. I mean, like all over America, like the riding seems to be sort of more uniform. I know I sort of risk like sounding biased, but at least to me, it sort of seems that way. Like it sort of has like certain similarities to it. I mean, it might be because how it was developed. I mean, like there are all those big influences on the American scene, like influences from the proto guys, influences from the tilt guys, and like all of this. Like you can really feel it in the scene. It's not that I'm trying to say that like the influences end there, and like in Europe there are none. I mean, that's bullshit. Like in Europe they are also there, but it's, to me basically it's mostly the different culture, because like all over America the culture is more or less the same, right? Like yeah, like I guess there are quite some big differences, let's say between Texas and like Vermont and like California and I don't know, Washington, right? But overall it seems to me that it has like this American vibe. Like yeah, I mean people of America relate to this idea of American culture, don't they? But in Europe, it's different. Like there are all those different countries, and like they all sort of have like certain cultures of their own. It also has to do something with architecture. European countries and cities are generally much older than the ones in America. So the architecture is different and like the cultural resources are different. This is mostly what actually shapes your writing, like the urban space that you work with, cultural space within which you actually have to exist and do your writing.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense because I always did wonder like how sort of like your videos and then the Dissidence videos and people from Barcelona, how they were so drastically different.
Even if the countries are like not so far away from each other, it might be even the language barrier. I don't know, I'm not sure, but like the videos are like the fact remains that the videos are mostly completely different. The scene in Slovakia is different to the one that's in Czech Republic, and there is even no language barrier. Like there is not even like that much of a difference in culture. If you move more towards the west, like writing that's happening in Austria, it's different to the writing that's happening in Germany. Like also those two countries speak completely the same languages. Then you have Switzerland. I'm not going to say that they speak the same language because there are like more parts of Switzerland and each speak different languages, but like there is not so much of a language barrier, but the writing is like completely different, right? Because like that's where micro scooters is originated from. That's where Benji Freund is based at. Like that's also something completely different to anything else. I don't know, it might be that like the people are not so well connected. The scenes were growing up being more isolated because like in America there used to be Scoot Resource. I believe like the older guys from Europe would sort of socialize there. The younger guys probably weren't even writing at times. Scoot Resource was still active.
Yeah, I definitely remember European people being on Scooter Resource, but
yeah, I mean we are probably speaking more about like guys like Medis Cook and like those super OG guys, right? Medis is like living in quite a remote area of Europe, Estonia. Do American people think of European style as like a French style, as like riding pegs and like doing crazy technical combos and like?
I would say so. Yeah, I think that that
because it's like it's so misleading because there's like so much more to that. Like you have all the guys from North, like from Sweden, from Norway, from Denmark. There is such a great diversity of styles, and like we basically already mentioned sort of when we were talking about like direct audience and passive audience. Apart from what you consider scootering to be like, it might be like sort of interesting to think apart from this perspective and like for a minute think about what like people outside from scootering think about scootering, because it's like I feel like there are many misconceptions in this manner. I'm not sure in which episode it was, but you mentioned like that we as a scooter riders community are sort of ought to like make scootering appealing to the outsiders in order to sort of like live by. Yeah, that's true. You mentioned some more specific ways how you'd like to achieve that, to like make scootering look cool.
Well, that was actually Parrish.
There certainly was this idea being mentioned that we sort of are obligated to make scootering look cool to the outsiders. Yeah, I really don't like this notion. Like, I feel it's so sort of like blunt. Like, why would you want to make scootering look cool in first place? Like, that's not really the point. You don't do it because it's cool. You do it, and you do it because you want to do it, and you do it for your own reasons. And by doing so, it actually becomes cool. Sort of vice versa. You don't make it cool by wanting to make it cool. You make it cool by doing it like the way you feel about it. And if somebody is able to relate to that, that makes it appealing to them. So it's not really as easy as like just making scootering look cool. I would say like more about educating people, but that's not really what it is. If you are able to actually create something that people outside of scootering are able to appreciate, thus they find it to be appealing to them or maybe even cool, that's the desired effect. But you don't achieve it straight but by making scootering cool. You can't really take this shortcut. Like, it doesn't go that way.
What did you think about the Dissidence Coalition stuff? Because most teams in that were from different countries, so it was like sort of I was curious about what was gonna happen, you know.
I really like the idea and like the whole conception of how it was done. I also really like that the teams were mixed up, so it wasn't like just the American guys in one team or like just the French guys in one team. It was like the teams were all really diverse. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to actual cinematography, I mean, that really is up to the guys who were behind each of those edits. I liked some editing. Yeah, I don't really see this as a presentation of cinematography. I see this more of a presentation of writing itself.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, it was an experiment because nothing has really ever been done like that in scootering.
Just the conception that it's invitation only. I feel like it's stepping up. In first place, you have to deserve to be there. So it's not really like, fuck it, I'm going to win this jam. It's a little bit deeper than that.
Do you want to talk about the new video you're working on?
It should actually happen this summer. I don't really remember when I've uploaded the teaser. It really is happening. That's the first thing. Yeah, it's like 2/3 already done. I probably wouldn't really call it like full length. What actually is a full length? Like, how long does a video has to be in order to be called a full length, right? What are the factors? I mean, there will be parts, but they won't be riders based. If you have like this sort of structure in videos, that each rider has a separate part, it really does underline the factors like individual style of the rider. But I feel that it's possible to create more interesting structures in terms of spots and like in terms of how the riding overall works together if you actually mix footage from all the riders. So it's like you are not getting four different pictures of one thing, you are getting 4 pieces that together actually create a whole picture.
I definitely know what you mean by not having individual parts. I remember I was editing Tilt 2. At the time, Josh Young was still on, so he had a part. And then he decided he didn't want to be on Tilt anymore, so he didn't have a part in that video. But all I had to do was take his part out of the timeline, and that was it. He could be like completely removed from that video, and that made me think, like, well, maybe this isn't a good format because it should feel like one continuous film than sort of like 3-minute montages of people's riding.
I feel like if it's really done with precision, you can achieve the same effect, but at least for me, I mean, this works better. Yeah, I mean, sometimes when you have video consisting of parts, of rider-based parts, it sort of feel more like a compilation. Instead of one album, you have like a list of top hits from a band, so you can't really take away one piece from the album without affecting the whole output. It's a more symbiotic organism. It won't work without each other.
Yeah, I'm always interested in editing videos like that, but I feel like scooter riders are kind of stubborn and traditional in their ways, And if you proposed editing a longer video, like an hour-long video, and there weren't individual parts, I mean, I've actually like proposed that to the people on Tilt, and most everybody is like, no, absolutely not. Like, we can't do that. Or some people will say, like, all right, if you're doing that, then I'm just not going to put all my effort towards it because it's not a real video, which is kind of disappointing.
Yeah, I don't really think that there's a right attitude towards it, because, I mean, you can still create parts. Like, the video still can be cut into pieces, and the pieces can still exist as separate individual parts. The parts can still stand on their own, like with their own meaning. And when they are put together, like, they even go further beyond and like create the bigger picture. And you can do this even without the parts being based on the riders.
It's better when it's sort of not a compilation, but it tells a story or kind of express.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. Like, you can sort of create structures with it. So that's basically how the name came together. Urban confrontation, how the urban space is built up. Like, you have all those structures. That's basically like the structures are not only in the streets, in the cities, but also like in the riding. Like, you have certain structures, like lines are structures. The way you think about riding, like, you think in structures, right? Like, also the video is put together in structures. So like, there is so much more to it than just putting all the clips of one individual together. You are losing so much potential just by doing so, because you are, let's say, expected to do that.
And I think that the general opinion of people can only be changed by people like yourself who break the traditional format, and then they watch those videos and they realize, oh, well, this actually could work this way.
You have like all those montage style videos in skateboarding. I'm not sure if this is totally the same thing, because this is not really like montage. Yeah, I mean, it still has that feel of like everybody involved.
Yeah, I mean, that's how the Supreme skateboard video was.
It feels a little bit more relatable, because like you sort of feel like you are actually out there seshing. I mean, I get it, like individual parts are sort of like portfolios for riders, but we are not selling ourselves, right? I mean, what's the point? But I mean, there's this Japanese video called LENZII, and I believe it was directed by a guy called Shinpei Uena. It actually feels like a documentary about Japanese skateboarding. It still is a real skateboarding video. Just the scale at which the video is done, like, I don't know how long it took to produce that video, but it was like, I don't know, 5 years, 6 years maybe. Like, the amount of skateboarders involved in it is like, it's a ridiculous amount of people, like 150 guys. If everybody would be to have their own part, like, that's just not happening, right? I mean, like, wouldn't ever work out. I feel like it has over 12 chapters, and it's more or less based on the cities. It pictures the different parts of the skateboarding scene in Japan.
All right. Do you have any other topics?
Yeah, I actually would like to get back to one of your first questions was like, what actually is alchemy and like how it started. What I've said by so far is like very unsure answer. I mean, I've talked a little bit about how I came to the idea, but not really what it is. So like, by so far, everything I've mentioned was like, it's merely an open-ended crew that is quite accurate, but doesn't really give much info about it. I mean, thinking about it this way might sound a little bit too utopistic, but I maybe like to think about it more as a way to approach to scootering rather than like a personal project. Look at ourselves as a protagonists of that approach towards scootering. we do what we want to see more of in scootering. So yeah, I mean, broken into pieces is really as simple as that. The name itself, yeah, alchemism from the medieval times, like it's the very same thing that we are doing. Like you take something worthless, by doing the actual alchemy, the product you are ending up with has some added value to it. So there's like this very elementary question as a scooter riders, like we don't really need to say ourselves like what's the actual reason why we scooter. Like we ride scooters because it's fun, like, right? Like we are having good times riding our scooters. But how would you explain this to somebody who doesn't scooter, right? Or like, let's say, how would you explain this to somebody that has like no source, no experience of such sort, like never rode a bike, never rode a skateboard, like doesn't really know how it feels. So I feel like this is a very important question to answer in order to somehow like explain ourselves. I feel like there is this sort of sport versus art, and I feel like it's sort of stupid. It's like the very same thing as park versus street.
Yeah, it's an argument that doesn't need to be argued.
In order to actually answer the question, like what's the reason for scootering, like you have to really like step further away and like look at it at a bigger scale. Like let's brainstorm, like what's similar to scootering. Like you could mention all sort of like those alternative sports. You can go beyond it. Like you could say like music might be similar to what we are doing, and you could go even further, like visual art, acting might be similar, like, or the performative arts. If you step even further from that and like you go a little back in time, like what actually was the reason why people are doing all of those? When you go even further, like what's the reason why people even communicate, like why they do it? Like since we were living in the caves, like we are drawing on the walls, like why the fuck were we doing it? Like what was the reason? Like that's a very same question to be answered. In the end, it's not just to express ourselves, like we only do all of this to express ourselves.
I think I would answer the question similar. I would say it's expression, but I would also say it's just absolute freedom, which I think is really important.
It definitely does have to do with like sort of rebelling, maybe freedom of movement, freedom of expression. I wouldn't like to be the guy who is in charge of editing this one, because like everything we've said so far is like so confusing. You'll be having bad times trying to like shed some order into our words because we've said a lot of crap.
Yeah, I mean that's just how normal conversations are, though. It is pretty intensive to edit these things, though. It takes a while.
I see why you really need like one whole month. Thank you basically for getting me involved. Like I'm stoked to expressing some of my opinions.
Yeah, I'm really glad I could get you on. I mean, as far as a guest on the show, I just really wanted to diversify and not only do people in America. And I mean, really the first thing I thought of when I thought of anything international was your videos. So
yeah, I mean, there are probably more people in Europe that would be like worthwhile to talk to.
Oh, I plan on it. Yeah.
At the first place, like, thank you for even coming up with this whole idea of podcast. It's great that someone is willing to like invest their free personal time to give us like more independent source of information. There is like no stable source of information, so it's nice to have something like this.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt. So I just wanted to create something that could attempt to lead people towards a steady source of information.
Even if people do not relate to the information that's being discussed, it's still good that some sort of discussion is being created.
All right, that's it for episode 5 with Yuri. Of course, thank you to Yuri. Thank you to all the listeners. Thanks Ben Bursel for the graphic design and music for this. And just a side note, I'm back from the month and a half Tilt bus trip that went on, and I just want to say thank you to everyone just all over the country that came up to me and talked to me about this podcast. That was really unexpected, and I really appreciate the feedback a lot. And one thing that I was asking everybody when I talked to them in person this summer about the podcast is I recently heard that SoundCloud is shutting down, and I did some research into it. It seems like there's been rumors about that for years, like a long time, like since 2012. But supposedly the top like executive or CEO or whatever of SoundCloud was in meetings this summer, basically like trying to get like bought out or like a bailout, because if not, SoundCloud was going to go out of business. And from what it seems like, that was successful, and SoundCloud is not going to go out of business. But I was just asking everybody, like, what would be the best source for them to listen to this podcast on if it weren't for SoundCloud? YouTube would probably reach the most people, but the issue with YouTube is that, I mean, the majority of people use phones now, and you can't lock your phone and listen to YouTube unless you have a YouTube paid account, and obviously nobody's going to do that. So it's extremely inconvenient to listen to a 2-hour podcast and not be able to lock your phone. And then, I mean, my all-time favorite platform for podcasts is just the Apple iTunes podcast app, because it's really nice how you can download the episodes and listen to them offline. The only thing I don't like about that is it's not really that social. Like, people can leave reviews on the podcast, but I really like feedback. Feedback is like the most important thing to me, because I started this, and like I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I kind of have a general idea of what I want to do and what should be done, but I really just want to get feedback from the listeners, and I have been getting feedback, and it's great. But on iTunes, you can't really leave a comment on the specific episode, and you can't engage in a discussion with other people, which probably the best platform for that would be YouTube. And I also feel like, just like another audience I'm trying to target is these younger scooter kids, to try to show them the importance of the history of scootering and maybe change their outlook on scootering in general. And I just don't know if they would go on iTunes. I don't know if that's like a platform for that younger generation. So I mean, maybe it is. But also what I quickly found out with SoundCloud is that it has a upload time limit for a free account, and that even if you pay, like, the various levels of paid accounts still have time limits. So, and that time limit was like 2 hours. So essentially, like, within uploading one episode to the account, like the next episode, if I uploaded it, the first one would be hidden. So I had to buy like the absolute most premium account, which is, I mean, it's not like a lot of money. It's like $135 a year. But if SoundCloud isn't the best platform, and it's just such a, like, you have to pay money to put it on there, I would be open to something else. I'm still thinking about it, but I kind of want to avoid just trying to, like, just the default of like, oh, I just need this to be listened to, so I'm going to put it on absolutely every outlet available, because I feel like if people really want to listen to this, they will know how to find it and go find it. But I also do want some sort of nudge. If you're not in some sort of like online circle, there's just things that you will never see, and it's not that you don't want to see them. It's just kind of how it works. So, I was thinking about doing YouTube and iTunes only, but I'm still thinking about it. And also, since SoundCloud isn't going away, I mean, maybe just still SoundCloud. But I'd really appreciate it if you commented on this episode and maybe just voiced your opinion or just emailed me about this and really about anything related to this podcast. And the email for that is thetandempod@gmail.com. And probably our next episode, I'm thinking, is going to be back from international to somebody in America. I have a couple good ideas, so yeah, get excited for that. And just remember, every episode is on the last Friday of every month, and I am going to try to stick to that as strict as possible. But so far, it's going pretty well. So thanks for listening, guys. See ya.